After 15 years of isolation, I shockingly revealed my amazing transformation when they showed up. Jake looked at the crumbling walls of his family home, the shadows of what was left of his dreams wrapping tightly around him. 15 years of silence had numbed his world, but now, with a design competition deadline looming, he felt the sharp prick of his past creeping back. The whispered memories, the betrayal, the drumming of his heart pushing against the grip of his anxiety. He was teetering on the edge of something monumental. Could he truly show his work? The thought of being vulnerable again made his stomach churn. Would it be a step towards redemption, or just another reminder of his failure? As he sank deeper into self-doubt, he thought about his mentor, the man who once hailed him as a prodigy. The same man who shattered his spirit and left him a ghost of his former self. Could he overcome the shame of walking into that room, standing in front of the same council that had witnessed his demise? Ambivalence clawed at him. He wanted to prove that he wasn't that kid anymore, yet the dread that what lay ahead could mirror his past loomed larger. Then, Sarah reappeared in his life. His childhood friend, once a source of warmth, now felt like a wild card threatening his fragile rebellion. She championed hope, and her energy swirled around him, infusing him with a determination he hadn't felt in years. But her presence was also a reminder of the friendships he'd lost, the years spent locked away with only his regrets as company. Could he trust her? What if she revealed his struggles to the very people he feared? Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now, let's continue. The ticking clock matched his fraying nerves. The town, familiar yet foreign, watched him like a hawk. Jake found himself constantly gauging their expressions, projecting their fears onto himself. Desperation set in. What would they say? Would they dismiss his designs as merely an echo of his former self? He fought against the tide of his insecurities, but felt them rising like floodwaters ready to drown him. The weight of his family's legacy pressed on him, and the thought of unveiling his work felt akin to stripping his soul bare in front of the world. The deadline drew near, each passing moment thickening the tension in his chest. When he envisioned presenting to the council, the walls closed in, smothering him with dread. Would he crumble under the pressure? As visions of jeers and judgment replayed in his mind, he felt a trickle of nausea. Trusting himself seemed like a distant dream. What if he failed again? But then, as he scanned the sketches sprawled across his desk, he saw the flicker of possibility. Could it also be an opportunity to rewrite the narrative? Or would it just deepen the fracture in his heart? Jake sat in his dimly lit room, the design sheet across from him trembling in his almost spent hands. The silence of his sanctuary felt suffocating, the anticipation gnawing at him. Flashes of townsfolk's doubting eyes taunted him. He had climbed far and fallen harder, yet here he was, one step away from facing his greatest test. Could he choose joy and connection over the echoes of betrayal? As he wrestled with that conundrum, the very foundation of his future teetered. What lay ahead would either illuminate his darkest corners or solidify his greatest fear, that he may never truly belong again. Jake closed his eyes, trying to shut out the impending chaos that loomed just beyond the confines of his room. His mind screamed at him to abandon the competition. It whispered of safety and solitude, the comfort of those 15 years spent in isolation. Yet, there was another voice, faint but persistent, pushing against the walls he had so diligently constructed. The sketches he had poured his heart into beckoned him, each line and curve a promise of what could be, a testament to the man he was striving to become. The room was lifeless, yet every corner of it felt alive with his unease. He opened one eye reluctantly, glancing at his designs, sprawled before him like the fragments of a new identity. Each page infused with hope, creativity, and just the faintest hint of terror. He had spent countless nights perfecting these ideas, channeling an innate talent that had lain dormant for far too long. It was time to emerge from the cocoon of his shattered past. He picked up a pencil, his fingers trembling slightly, as if momentarily reconnecting with a long-lost friend. This, he reminded himself, was an opportunity not merely for recognition, but for healing, a chance to reclaim his narrative. There was power in this act of creation, a quiet rebellion against the years of doubt that had tried to suffocate him. As the pencil glided across the paper, he couldn't help but recall the moments that had led him to this juncture, the harsh words from his mentor, the ridicule he had endured. Each painful memory fueled his resolve. With each stroke, he began to sculpt a vision not for approval, but for reconciliation with himself. This was more than a design. It was a declaration of existence. With newfound clarity, his thoughts raced through the important details of the presentation. He imagined entering the room, the council members seated like judges ready to scrutinize his every move. The image flashed before him, daunting yet exhilarating. A tangible knot of determination wrapped around his heart. What if he channeled that fear into his presentation? What if he mirrored the uncertainty of those moments into the passion of his designs? The idea of embracing vulnerability sparked a sudden rush of adrenaline. The doubts and fears were still present, lurking like shadows at the edges of his consciousness, but they no longer held the same power. It was as if he could feel the weight of judgment shifting, a burden he could mold into strength. This was his battle, and winning was not merely achieving glory, but surviving to tell the story of his journey. Jake glanced out the window, the world bustling beyond the confines of his solitude. A flicker of excitement ignited within him as the thought struck. Perhaps this was his moment to reconnect not only with the council but with himself and the people he had kept at bay for so long. Suddenly, the haunting echoes of failure morphed into a call for connection, a reminder that through pain could emerge artistry. Inspiration coursed through him, propelling him towards not just the competition, but towards a bold leap into uncertainty. As he continued sketching, visions flashed in his mind of not only standing before the council, but sharing not just his work, but fragments of himself. His heart raced at the tantalizing prospect of inspiring others who had struggled just as he had. Jake felt an unyielding urge to push beyond the threshold of his fortitude. Armed with his designs and a fragile yet budding sense of self-worth, he looked deeper into himself. That old notion of what was expected felt like shackles loosening against the backdrop of a burgeoning resolve. Would he dare step into that room and share his truth? The decision animated his muscles. The time was approaching, and his deadline loomed. As he finished the last stroke on a sketch, he could almost hear the applause or the whispers of disapproval, but he chose to focus on a third option: acceptance. Acceptance of his past, acceptance of his vulnerability, and acceptance of the chance to rekindle connections. Yet, just as liberation beckoned, a text notification buzzed on his phone, cutting through the focus he had so carefully built. It was Sarah. "Hey, can we talk? I have something important to share. I think you need to hear it." A shiver of apprehension rippled through Jake. What could Sarah possibly want to discuss? As nervousness crept back in, uncertainty loomed, challenging his resolve to step forward. The path was blending into an intricate web, and he needed to decide, would this conversation fortify him, or would it upend the last vestiges of his newfound confidence? The magnitude of his choice pressed heavily against him, a lingering question hanging in the air, demanding to be answered. Jake stared at the screen, Sarah's message lingering like a specter over his thoughts. The weight of her request challenged the reservoir of courage he had begun to tap into. Would this conversation be a step toward his goal, or a distraction that led him deeper into doubt? He took a deep breath, setting the phone down. Dismissing her message wasn't an option. He had made a promise to himself to face his fears head-on. He stood up and paced around the small confines of his room, each footfall echoing his internal conflict. The walls seemed to close in, reminding him of the isolation he both feared and, in some ways, craved. When he glanced back at his sketches, a wave of determination washed over him. The designs weren't mere drawings anymore. They represented his rebirth. Each line was an affirmation that he was moving forward, not backward. He could push through this moment. His heart hammered against his ribs, with equal measures of fear and excitement. Jake sighed, picking up his phone once more. He hesitated before responding, deliberating on how to bridge the gap that had formed between him and Sarah over the years. The spontaneous notes he sent during their college days felt like relics from a different life. He typed out a simple response. "Sure, I'm free. Let me know when and where." As the minutes ticked away, anticipation mingled with anxiety. He couldn't help but replay their past conversations in his mind, the laughter, the dreams, the unguarded moments. But he also remembered the friction that had turned their friendship fragile. The pressure of expectations crept in, making him question what she wanted to discuss. The suggesting that came next jolted him from his reverie. It was a call. "Hey, Jake. Thanks for getting back to me." Sarah's voice was warm, yet it carried an underlying tension. "Can we meet at the cafe on Hawthorne? There's something important about the past, about your work." "Sure," Jake replied, feeling slightly unmoored.
The past.
Those words felt heavy, filled with unspoken stories and half-forgotten moments. He had just managed to carve out his identity anew. Now it seemed she wanted to dig up old wounds. After hanging up, a familiar unease returned, tightening its grip around him. He paced again, clenching and unclenching his fists, battling with his thoughts. Maybe this meeting could be different. Maybe sharing his designs, revealing his truth, would transform his anxiety into something constructive. Arriving at the cafe later, he found Sarah already seated at a table near the window, the sunlight casting a golden glow around her. She looked up and smiled, but it faltered as Jake approached. He felt anxious, wondering how much of his past he would need to relive. "Hey, it's been a while," Sarah said, her voice tinged with nostalgia. "Yeah," he replied, sliding into the seat across from her. "You mentioned something important?" Sarah nodded, her expression shifting to one of seriousness. "I've been working with a few people on a project that could really use someone with your skills. I know it's been a decade since we were in touch, but I always believed in your talent, Jake. I'm hoping you'll consider collaborating." For a moment, the warmth of her encouragement momentarily dulled his fears. Yet it also left a heavy question lingering in the air. Why now? Why me? An awkward silence stretched before Sarah continued. "I've seen the artwork you've been sharing. You've grown so much. I thought maybe we could reconnect, not just for this project, but as friends." Jake's heart raced at her words. Here was an opportunity to blend his past with his present, to reclaim parts of his life he thought he had lost forever. But the specter of doubt lurked in the background. Would this invitation rehabilitate him, or expose him to ridicule again? He weighed his choices carefully. Could he trust what was unfolding before him, or were old traumas about to resurface? Jake's pulse quickened, sensing a critical shift on the horizon, one that might redefine not just his art, but his very essence. "Let us talk about the project," he said, fighting to keep his voice steady. As they discussed details, the excitement formed a thread pulling him toward possibility, yet the shadows of his past loomed nearby, reminding him that stepping back into his old life came with its own risks. The conversation began to ebb and flow, revealing not just potential collaboration but facets of themselves long buried. Yet, small fragments of their history tugged at Jake's conscience, raising the stakes of this reunion. As Sarah elaborated on the project, a thought struck him. Was he ready to embrace rekindling connections, or was he stepping into a tumultuous emotional quagmire? Just as they began to delve deeper into the project, Sarah's phone buzzed, drawing her attention. The notification seemed ominous amidst the emotional resurgence they were navigating. "Sorry, I need to take this," she said, rising from her seat. Jake's breath caught as uncertainty filled the air between them. What if this conversation unraveled everything he had just built? He watched her step away, feeling the weight of the moment press down. Could he truly manage the storm that lay ahead? Jake's mind raced while staring at the wet streets glistening outside. The conversation, the potential, and the fears coalesced into a single, jarring realization. He stood at a crossroads where the past and present intertwined. Would he continue to embrace the strength he had begun to forge, or crumble under the pressure of what was yet to come? The answer felt just beyond his grasp, shrouded in uncertainty and possibility. And then, as Sarah returned with a furrowed brow, Jake knew the next words from her lips could change everything once more. Jake fidgeted in his seat, acutely aware of the silence that settled between him and Sarah. Her expression had shifted like the clouds before a tempest, and he could sense the gravity of the moment pressing down on him. Had she received troubling news? Or was her demeanor a reflection of the weight of their conversation? The energy in the cafe felt charged, as if they were surrounded by an audience eager to witness the drama unfolding. "What's wrong?" he asked, his voice steady yet quietly probing. Sarah hesitated, glancing at her phone before locking eyes with him. "There has been a shift in plans for the project. You see, a major investor has dropped out. We might have to rethink our approach moving forward." Her brows furrowed deeper, indicating that the situation was more complicated than she let on. Jake's stomach tightened as disappointment seeped in. He had clung to the hope that this collaboration could signify a new chapter for him, an opportunity to reclaim not just his artistry, but a piece of the social fabric he had stepped away from. "So, what does that mean for us?" he asked, trying to mask the frustration brewing within. Sarah sighed, rubbing her temples as if to ease a growing headache. "It means we need to come up with a pitch that'll attract new interest and fast. I thought you could be really instrumental in showcasing your designs and refreshing our visuals." But her voice trailed off, leaving an unspoken question hanging in the air. "But," Jake pressed, unable to keep the edge of wariness from creeping into his tone. "But we need to act now, and that means diving into this together like old times." Her eyes searched his for some flicker of understanding or agreement. Old times. The phrase reverberated within him, eliciting mixed emotions. Nostalgia flickered against an overarching sense of dread. Collaborating with Sarah would force him to confront not only his professional insecurities, but also those buried feelings of regret and unfulfilled ambition that had sown doubt through the years. "What do you want from me, exactly? I mean, we've both changed a lot over the years, haven't we?" He attempted to probe deeper, wanting to discern where their friendship truly stood amidst this whirlwind collaboration. "I want you to invest your newfound confidence into this project," she replied, her voice softening. The warmth in her tone momentarily shattered the walls he had built around himself. "I believe in you, Jake. I always have. I need someone who gets the vision for this, and who better than the person who once thrived in creative chaos." The sentiment sent a wave of emotions crashing over him. Was it possible that this very moment of vulnerability could pivot his existence? Could his art, once an extension of his fears, morph into a beacon of potential? As he caught her hopeful gaze, an inner resolve solidified. This was his chance to redefine not just how others viewed him, but how he perceived himself. "Fine," he said, his voice firming, a steadying breath following his declaration. "Let us do it. Let us plunge into this project." The words tumbled out with greater conviction than he initially felt. "Really?" Sarah's face lit up, relief washing over her features. "That's amazing. I was worried you might worrying isn't going to help," he interjected, feeling reinvigorated by their exchange. It was the kind of boldness he craved, the type that would mark this chapter of his life as something distinct and promising. With an exhilarating mix of anxiety and excitement, they began mapping out the framework of their collaboration. As they discussed elements of the design and marketing strategies, Jake felt increasingly alive. The thrill of possibility surged within him, gradually eclipsing his earlier self-doubt. However, just as clarity began to envelop their ambitions, Sarah glanced at her phone once more, her face blurring with concern. The moment seemed surreal, a rising wave of enthusiasm contrasted suddenly against her unease. "It's about the investor," she said, her voice rushing as if the truth carried urgency. "They're looking for something different now. There's a deadline, and if we're not prepared, we could lose everything." With each word, Jake felt the newfound momentum slip through his fingers like grains of sand. Had he gambled on a project teetering on the edge of collapse? Was his moment for growth destined to end before it truly began? Sarah, what if we can convince them? We need to show them the value of our work, of what I can bring, he urged, a spark igniting within him. Let me take the lead on the visual concepts. I have ideas that could shift their perspective. Do you really think you can? She regarded him cautiously, apprehensively weighing the stakes. But somewhere in her expression, he caught a glimpse of belief, a seed at the core of his own self-doubt. Absolutely, he declared, his resolve solidifying. Just give me a chance to craft something extraordinary. As they immersed themselves in the planning, an electric tension surged once more. The stakes had risen. The shadows of uncertainty loomed larger. Would he rise to meet the challenges ahead, or would he falter under the legacy of his past? Engulfed in the storm of mixed feelings, Jake pondered the road ahead, and the capacity for transformation lay dormant within. What lay ahead could usher in a new beginning or a reckoning that could unravel everything. And as they continued to strategize about the project, it dawned upon him that this collaboration was not merely about art, but a true test of character and resilience, leading to a revelation he hadn't fully understood yet. Was he ready to confront not just the uncertainties of this venture, but the ghosts of his own making? Jake leaned forward, his fingers dancing over the placemat as he envisioned the possibilities for their pitch. The weight of Sarah's earlier words settled in his mind, the looming deadline gnawing at him. The project could be a breakthrough, but it needed a spark. He could feel a pulsing determination rising in him as he considered what was required. What can we create that will truly stand out? He asked, the urgency in his voice unexpected as he took a step closer to embracing the challenge. Ideas flickered and faded like dimming stars. He needed something bold, something that redefined their approach. Sarah nodded, the initial glimmer of hope returning to her eyes. We could incorporate interactive elements, show them that our designs don't just convey a message, but engage the audience. Interactive could work, Jake replied, energized by the shift. Imagine integrating augmented reality into the presentation. It could illustrate the impact of our work in real time. The thought sparked a current of creativity within him. The remnants of his hesitation began paling in comparison to the vibrant vision taking shape. As they brainstormed, Jake's mind raced. Images of innovative designs filled his thoughts, and he felt a surge of exhilaration, an unfamiliar sensation that eclipsed the nagging shadows of doubt. He had often taunted himself, convinced that his artistry was but a shadow of its former brilliance. Here, however, he sensed an awakening, a chance to reclaim not just his professional skill but also a sense of pride in his abilities. Let us not just meet their expectations, let us exceed them, Jake asserted, his voice firm. I want to workshop this presentation until it leaves them no choice but to invest in us. With a renewed sense of purpose, they transitioned from ideation to planning. Words flowed as they mapped out the presentation, detailing the visual narrative. Jake felt he was rediscovering himself. Each idea was a thread weaving back into the fabric of who he once was. Yet, beneath that excitement lingered the unsettling doubts that had plagued him for years. Could he truly step into the light after lingering so long in darkness? Would his concepts resonate, or would he once again fall short? No more second-guessing, he thought, focusing it all into creativity instead of doubt. It's time to build, not just dream. As they worked late into the evening, Jake's energy infused the air. Creativity breathed life into his conversations with Sarah, and together they discussed the nuances of color theory, emotional impact, and user engagement. He critiqued his own past designs, seeking the lessons hidden behind every failure, reshaping the mistakes that had long haunted him into building blocks for his renewed vision. Every moment spent working alongside Sarah felt like stepping into a forge of self-definition. Her enthusiasm was contagious. He thrived on it. Each idea molded not only their project, but also a vision of who he aspired to be. They paused as the clock struck midnight, both aware that they had shunted aside fears and embraced possibility. Then, as they reviewed their notes, the atmosphere shifted. Jake's heart raced momentarily out of rhythm as Sarah's brow furrowed. She scrunched her phone in her hand, her gaze distant. Jake, I've just received an email from the investor. They want to see our pitch sooner. The punch of urgency into their collaboration pierced through the careful cocoon they had built. The implications were clear. This was no longer the time for gradual refinement. They were racing against a clock that grew louder with every tick. "Can we pull it together in time?" he asked, his voice a mixture of confidence and trepidation. "It's going to take everything we've got, and then some." She hesitated, her eyes locking onto his with more intensity than ever. "But can you handle the pressure?" Jake felt a familiar jolt of anxiety creep in, but there was a difference, now a sliver of fire within him. "Let us make it happen. This project could be my chance to show what I can really do." As the adrenaline surged, Jake recognized the moment for what it was, a pivotal juncture, a moment of truth. Would he rise above past disappointments or retreat into insecurity? The stakes had never been higher, and he could feel the remnants of his self-doubt somewhat eclipsing his resolve. "Tomorrow we prove ourselves," he declared, determination anchoring his words. Yet somewhere in the depths of his psyche lurked the nagging question, what if this time, facing the truth could turn out to be more than just a career victory? What if it meant renouncing more than just his past failures, but also embracing a new identity entirely, with the weight of everything swirling around him? Jake prepared for a leap into the unknown, a radical shift that could redefine his practical competencies and notions of self-worth. And as they left the cafe, the darkness of uncertainty encroaching upon them once more, he could feel the thrill rise. The day ahead promised confrontation, an encounter that could ultimately determine not only the success of their project but also the reckoning of who he would choose to become in the process. The early morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across Jake's cluttered desk. He sat hunched over his laptop, combing through each slide of the presentation with the kind of focus he hadn't felt in years. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air, a small comfort amidst the brewing storm of pressure. His heart raced as he mentally rehearsed the pitch, deepening the well of determination within him. Jake knew this was not just another job opportunity. It was a test of his very core, a revealing moment that could either stabilize or shatter his newly redefined identity. Each word he typed resonated with a purpose only fueled by the understanding they had rushed into over those pivotal hours the night before. "Engagement through interaction," he whispered, underscoring a phrase that defined their entire approach. Yet, despite the confidence that hung in the air, uncertainty lingered like a shadow. Could he truly sustain this newfound momentum as the hours ticked down? As he critiqued his slides, he couldn't help but flash back to the various self-imposed barricades that had limited his creativity in the past. In a moment of vulnerability, he questioned why he had shunned his talents for so long. In that state of reflection, clarity struck him like an electric jolt. His insecurities had created a labyrinth that he wandered in alone, dodging the critical challenge of self-expression. But now, he had company, a trusted partner who believed in him as much as he longed to believe in himself. "Get it together, Jake," he muttered, grounding himself in the moment. He needed a strategy, a plan that would not only present their ideas but also reinterpret who he was in the eyes of others. Would he be viewed as the artist lost in anonymity, or as a visionary ready to ignite the industry? By the time Sarah arrived, she found him breathing deeply, practicing his delivery in the midst of a storm of revision. "You look like you're about to run a marathon," she teased, but her smile masked the urgency of their time constraint. For a fleeting moment, he reveled in light-hearted banter that soothed the intensity gnawing at his insides. "More like preparing for a duel," he replied, fighting to keep humor in his tone. The gravity had to be morphed, and together they had to project confidence even if their hearts were waging a different battle. They commenced a rigorous review of each element, refining the interactive components that they hoped would elevate their pitch. With every passing minute, the pressure mounted, yet so did their synergy. The initial worries of inadequacy transformed into a driving force of creative adrenaline. For too long, Jake had viewed his past notions of failure as a shackle. Now, they became fuel for innovation. "Here, we need to clarify this interaction detail," Sarah suggested, her brow slightly creased. Her input cut through the tension like a blade, honing not just their project but their resolve as well. Jake felt an innate appreciation welling up inside him. He realized that he wasn't just working alongside a colleague. She represented a bridge to a future he feared but also desired. Was this what collaboration felt like? A blending not merely of ideas but of aspirations. As they neared completion, they moved into rehearsal mode, running through the pitch again and again, fighting to perfect not just what they wanted to communicate, but how to embody that vision. Jake pushed through his hesitation, learning to embrace the unfamiliarity of this collaborative space. Then the message pinged on Sarah's phone, slicing through their focused rhythm. The meeting was rescheduled for later that afternoon. Fleeting panic surged through Jake. "Can we do this?" he asked, the vulnerability of the moment catching him off guard. "Absolutely," Sarah replied, touching his arm reassuringly. "This gives us a bit more time to polish our presentation. We've got this." Jake bit back, the apprehension creeping back into his chest. Could he shake it off? Could he stand before them and showcase not just the best of their work, but the best of himself? The answer lingered like an unvoiced question. Could he embrace the new identity that he was being compelled to embody? As they reviewed their final slides, the realization hit him like a wave. This was more than a pitch. This was his chance to claim his voice, not just speak on behalf of their project, but also for himself in a way he had never quite mustered. With a hidden determination that now felt less like a burden and more of a promise, Jake straightened his back. The morning light illuminating his workstation seemed to whisper encouragement. It was no longer just about displaying designs. It was about embodying a conviction he had forgotten he was capable of delivering. "Let us show them," he said, the nervous quiver replaced by a certainty he scarcely recognized. He turned to Sarah, ready to face what lay ahead, feeling the collective energy surge within him, and as they packed their materials, a chilling thought surfaced. What if this presentation would confront not just his professional fears, but also unveil parts of himself long hidden, challenging everything he believed to be true about his own potential? The sun had climbed higher, its warmth teasing Jake's skin as he stepped outside for a breath of fresh air, a momentary reprieve from the whirlwind of his thoughts. The nearby trees swayed lightly in a gentle breeze, everything around him buzzing with energy. In stark contrast, Jake felt a conflict brewing within. The extra hours before their pitch were burning a hole in his gut, but he recognized that hesitation as a chance for reflection. 15 years, he murmured to himself, reflecting on the isolation he had allowed to swallow him whole. It wasn't just the years spent avoiding risk or innovation. It was the accumulated weight of fears that had taken root in his psyche. But today was the day he could transform that narrative. What did it mean to share his vision authentically? He wondered, pacing. For so long, he had hidden behind the guise of competence, pretending to fit an image that didn't resonate with who he was inside. Now, with the prospect of stepping into the limelight once again, he had to confront that narrative. There was no backing down. Jake turned and headed back indoors, feeling a renewed sense of urgency. Each step reverberated with the feeling of shedding an old skin. He sat back down at his desk, his fingers dancing across the keyboard as he evaluated their presentation anew. There was a power in assertiveness he had scarcely tapped into before, and it struck him that he could channel that energy into their work. "Let us nail this, Jake. No more second-guessing," he whispered to himself, invigorated by the thought of showing the world a glimpse of who he truly was. He opened their shared document and began typing notes for their presentation, points he believed would captivate their audience's attention while weaving in personal anecdotes about his journey. Personal stories forge emotional connections. "That's what we need," he said, collecting snippets of both his own experiences and Sarah's insights from their prepping sessions. This was more than a career move. It was an outstretched hand inviting understanding and engagement. The shift in perspective solidified his resolve. With every personal touch, he was building a bridge not only to their potential clients, but also reconnecting with himself. When Sarah rejoined him, carrying a stack of printed slides and a look of fierce determination, it was clear that she shared the same spirit. "You look different," she remarked, raising an eyebrow. The the corners of her mouth lifting into a knowing smile. "I feel different," Jake confessed, the weight of his insecurities feeling remarkably lighter. He was ready to embrace discomfort as a catalyst for authenticity, for growth. They dove into further rehearsal, each iteration of their presentation becoming more vibrant as Jake layered in stories of challenges faced and lessons learned. Each word was a leap of faith. Each pause allowed the message to sink in deeper. Sarah's feedback and encouragement sharpened his voice, transforming an internal dialogue of doubt into one of empowerment. If one connection could ignite even a small flicker of inspiration, to him, that was worth all the risk. As the call for them to present drew nearer, Jake felt a swell of emotions. The knot in his stomach twisted with anticipation, creating a strange synergy between fear and excitement. He took a moment to ground himself, reflecting on how far he had come, a journey that had begun long before today. "Time to face the music," he whispered, taking a deep breath. The final minutes propelled them into the conference room where they would lay bare their collective vision. But as Jake took his first step forward, the reality of the unknown hung in the air, electrifying and daunting. What parts of his past would he have to confront? What truths would surface in the heat of the moment? And as he felt the eyes of the panel upon him, the words nearly escaped him, a reminder that the true challenge had only begun. The moment of truth loomed, and Jake had to decide, would he rise to seize the opportunity, or would he retreat into the shadows he had known? For so long, Jake stood at the edge of the conference room, the air thick with uncertainty. The polished table stretched out before him like a vast, uncharted territory. As the panel members shifted their attention toward him, a swell of adrenaline mingled with apprehension clouded his mind. Could he accomplish what he had set out to do? His heart raced, each beat a reminder of the barriers he had built around himself over the years. Yet, in that instant, the weight of those barriers felt both punishing and liberating. He drew in a deep breath, vivid memories of his struggles stirring within, illuminating the path he had walked. "Remember who you are," he quietly mimicked Sarah's encouragement from their last rehearsal as he took a bold step forward. "This is your time." The presentation slides flickered to life, images of restless nights, sacrifices, and small victories playing across the screen. His voice ignited in a rich timbre, filled with emotion as he introduced their vision. He wove in threads of vulnerability, stories of failures that felt monumental at the time, yet had ultimately become stepping stones. It was cathartic, a tangible shedding of the past. As he spoke, the initial doubts that had coiled tightly in his chest slowly began to unravel. With every anecdote shared, he observed subtle nods from the panel. Connection sparked, not just with the audience, but within himself, a realization that revealing his true self was not just permissible, it was essential. He was not merely selling a concept. He was sharing a piece of his journey, a reflection of his ongoing evolution. Yet even as the words flowed easily, a nagging consciousness lingered. What if they rejected him? What if this display of authenticity crumbled in the face of scrutiny? The fear skirmished within him, but he pushed forth, surrendering to the moment's intensity. "I have spent years trapped in a cocoon of my own making," he confessed, gauging the reactions on the panel's faces. "Selling the image of who I thought I should be, rather than showing you who I truly am." A heavy silence followed, hanging in the air like a thick fog. Jake's heart pounded, anxiety flooding his mind once again. Suddenly, one of the panelists, a woman with sharp eyes and a thoughtful expression, leaned forward. "What gives you the confidence that this transformation you speak of can lead to success in this venture?" It was a pivotal moment, a direct confrontation of his intentions and growth. For a brief second, he faltered. But reflecting on the arduous process that had brought him here, clarity surged. "Because I've wrestled with my fears, and each time I've come out stronger. I've learned to trust vulnerability as a step toward genuine connection. That trust is what I bring into this partnership." His honesty held their gaze, the weight of truth resonating between them. The vulnerability he had once feared to share now stood as his strongest asset. He had chosen to bear his struggles and aspirations, cultivating authenticity. As the presentation reached its climax, Jake could see intrigue mixing with respect in their expressions. And when he concluded, the applause broke like a tide, drowning his lingering uncertainties. Relief coursed through him, but lingering questions remained. Had he truly evolved? Would they understand the lengths he'd traveled? Yet the journey wasn't over. The panel convened briefly, exchanging muted whispers and glances, their judgment falling heavy in the air. Jake could feel it. They were about to deliver a verdict that would shape his path forward, and as discussions swirled around him, he wondered if this moment was a reflection of his newfound self. What final revelations awaited him in the aftermath of this journey? The panel's murmured discussions created a backdrop of tension that flickered through Jake's mind like a dimming light. Each moment stretched, and he found himself caught between anticipation and pervasive anxiety. Had his journey resonated with them? The applause had been encouraging, but that was no guarantee. The deep-rooted fear of rejection clawed at him, threatening to overshadow his moment of triumph. As the panelists resumed their seats, Jake's thoughts spiraled into a whirlwind. He replayed his presentation repeatedly, each word, each inflection searching for flaws, moments where he might have faltered. His heart sank at the prospect that they might have seen him not as he had wished to be seen, but as a mere statistic of failure. Jake, the sharp-eyed panelist, called him back to reality. Your presentation was compelling, and your journey inspiring, but we need to talk about implementation. Vulnerability is commendable, and yet you must align that with actionable strategies. A wave of relief washed over him. They wanted to engage further, to dissect his vision. But as he focused on her words, the old habits of self-doubt resurfaced like echoes from the past. Could he truly anchor his vulnerability in solid, strategic thinking? Right, Jake replied as he squared his shoulders, imbuing his voice with newfound confidence. I recognize that openness must be balanced with strategy. I've devised a structured plan focusing on our client relationships, promoting a culture of transparency while ensuring profitability. As he spoke, Jake felt the intoxication of possibility beginning to replace fear. The decisions he made in his personal life, facing past demons, embracing honesty, began to translate into his professional aspirations. He outlined a two-pronged approach, cultivating client trust through storytelling while implementing data-driven metrics for performance. Each outline felt like a bridge connecting his personal growth with professional objectives. The panelists listened intently, their expressions shifting from skepticism to interest. One of the other members, an older gentleman with gray hair, exchanged glances with his colleagues before addressing Jake. What you propose requires not just transforming the business model, but transforming the mindset of every team member. How prepared are you to foster such a monumental shift? This question hit deep. Jake paused, reflecting on his own resistance to change. Was he truly ready to encourage a paradigm shift within his team? Change begins at the individual level, he said, recalling the struggle he had faced in his personal evolution. My experiences have taught me that when one person changes, they inspire those around them. I have seen it in my own journey among friends and colleagues. If I commit to fostering this culture, I believe it can catalyze a movement within our organization. The senior panelist narrowed his eyes slightly, appearing thoughtful. A noble aim, but it will require resilience. Not everyone will embrace the shift. Jake felt the tension resurface. This wasn't just about him anymore. It was about leading others through their discomfort toward growth. He had to commit fully. I understand. Resistance to change is inevitable. However, by creating a safe space for dialogue and recognizing individual hurdles, we can navigate through those barriers together. His resolve firmed, igniting a flickering determination within him. The panel members began to take notes, leaning in closer as Jake articulated ideas that blended both courage and pragmatism. Each suggestion he made felt closer to defining a leadership style he had yet to fully embrace. As their conversation drew to a close and they thanked Jake for his insights, a sense of exhilaration surged within him. Perhaps he had not just presented a business proposal, but had begun to embody the leader he aspired to be. With every challenge posed to him, his self-perception shifted from a solitary figure in a conference room to a potential catalyst for change and growth. Yet just as Jake felt a sense of accomplishment, the reality hit him. The panel would reconvene, but he was not finished confronting his fears. As he left the room, a looming question started to take shape in his mind. Was he genuinely ready to lead, or had he merely scratched the surface of what true vulnerability and strength would require? Embracing the uncertainty, he stepped into the hallway, mind racing with possibilities that lay ahead. What would it take to not just inspire change, but to embody it fully? The sun dipped low in the sky as Jake exited the conference room, a strange mix of exhilaration and apprehension swirling within him. For the first time in years, he felt a sense of belonging not just to his craft but to a larger narrative, his narrative. With every step he took towards the exit, he embraced the gravity of transformation. Gone were the days of shying away from discomfort, replaced by a fierce resolve to integrate his past struggles into future triumphs. That night, as he laid in bed, reviewing the day's events, a lightness settled over him that he hadn't experienced before. The presentation had been more than a chance to showcase his designs. It had been an affirmation of his growth, an impact that rippled outwards beyond just business. He had eloquently framed his vulnerabilities, transforming them into strengths that could rally people around a shared vision. This very moment served not only to elevate his work, but also to redefine how he saw himself. No longer a timid artist battling the shadows of failure, but a confident creator leading transformative change. In the days that followed, Jake received an email confirming that the council selected his presentation to move forward. It was the recognition he longed for, a validation pinning the weight of his isolation to a collective affirmation of his capabilities. The email felt like a long-lost token of acceptance, a reminder that he belonged not just in the world of design but in a larger community of creators driven by aspiration. Jake's heart brimmed with pride as he read and reread those words. He had not only survived, he had charted an impact through his artistry. Embracing the nuances of storytelling and connection in design, he secured his position as a leader both in innovation and inspiration. The self-doubt that had once anchored him began to dissolve, replaced by an unwavering confidence that solidified with every accomplishment. With renewed vigor, he delved into the intricacies of crafting the implementation plan for his project. Every detail became a labor of love, integrating emotional resonance within the frameworks of functionality. Jake worked tirelessly, seeking not just to fulfill the expectations set before him, but to exceed them. The committee's interest morphed into a collaborative partnership, igniting a powerful synergy that strengthened Jake's resolve. He was not merely producing aesthetics, he was building relationships, fostering communal aspirations through his designs. As weeks turned into months, Jake became more than a designer, he emerged as a recognized thought leader. Industry events and panels sought his insights, while coworkers began to approach him for mentorship. No longer shying away from the spotlight, he embraced it wholeheartedly, sharing his journey of resilience and growth. Each presentation inspired others navigating their own struggles, reminding him that vulnerability was not a weakness, it was a powerful catalyst for connection. The transformation extended beyond him. Sarah, now an intrinsic part of his collaborative framework, evolved alongside Jake, showcasing a strength he had never truly witnessed before. Together they formulated strategies that propelled their vision forward while intertwining personal growth and professional goals. For every obstacle they faced, they grew closer, exchanging ideas that carved pathways to innovative solutions, rooting their partnership in mutual respect and shared growth. Finally, amid all this progress and recognition, Jake acknowledged that the foundation of his acceptance had not stemmed solely from external validation, but from an internal reckoning. He had confronted his ghosts, and instead of allowing them to dictate his narrative, he had woven them into the fabric of his identity. Each recollection of pain transformed into a thread of courage, binding his story with an unshakable sense of self. As he addressed a packed auditorium one evening, speaking passionately about transformation and resilience, Jake felt a profound shift within. Looking out over the audience that hung onto his every word, he no longer saw judgment but reflection. They were engaged, inspired much like he had once yearned to be. He validated the shared human experience of overcoming doubts and embracing authenticity, learning that his struggles were what connected him to others in a real and potent way. In that moment, clear eyes met his gaze from the audience. Sarah's supportive smile beamed back at him, a silent affirmation of how far they had come together. Jake had not only stepped into his full potential, he had found his tribe. He had transcended isolation, validated both through personal and communal bonds forged in the fires of struggle. Jake concluded his talk, the applause echoing around him. In that room, surrounded by a tapestry of inspired faces, he felt a warmth swell in his chest. It was a moment of collective recognition, a genuine sense of achievement. He had conquered more than a design competition. He had conquered doubt, redefined his identity, and emerged victorious from the isolation he once held close. This was his moment, his transformation realized. He understood now. Belonging was not merely about acceptance. It was about embracing one's tale, connecting through shared experiences, and celebrating one's growth. And although the journey would inevitably continue filled with new challenges and opportunities, Jake stood firmly in his power, ready to shape the future of both his artistry and his life with profound confidence and endless possibilities. Subscribe immediately to the channel to not miss the next exclusive emotional stories. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Comment your reactions and theories about the ending. Share instantly this video with at least 5 friends who need to see this conclusion. You need to subscribe now. This is the moment to show your support. Don't wait even one more second to share. True fans of personal overcoming stories understand the importance of supporting the channel through these actions.